to my happy place. Today we are going to look at a courthouse steps block. The courthouse steps is a really actually very good transition from the 9 patch that we did earlier and moving on to this, and yet it's a little easier than doing the log cabin, which will likely be the next block that we do. Now the difference between the two with the courthouse steps, excuse me, what we're going to do is we're going to sew north and south or east and west, whichever you may call it, and then we're going to sew the opposite sides. In a log cabin, we actually sew around the block. I can't say in a circle because it's a block, but we sew around the block. So what I've done is I've laid this out, and I think this is probably the best way to lay out your block prior to sewing. You could have stacks like this of fabric here. It's okay. And it just makes it easier to see exactly what direction we need to go to next. Because when these two pieces of fabric are joined to this center block, which I'll turn it here so the right way, you can see I fussy cut it, which is really kind of fun. So I have this beautiful I think it's tulip pink fabric. I'm not really sure. Anyway, I have this beautiful little flower right here in the center, and I have other elements within this piece of fabric that I can add different things. So what I'm going to do is I'm first going to take my two pieces and we can put them right sides together. Now, how can we get away with that? The reason being is our seam is going to be on this side and on this side. So having two of them done at one time is no big deal. Now we talked about glue basting, and if you want to glue baste, what you would do is glue baste here and press it. Glue baste here within the seam allowance and press it. The important part is making sure that your glue stays within that seam line. Okay, so what we're going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and take a little pause. I'm going to get myself over to the sewing machine, and then we will continue with our courthouse steps block. Okay, we are back at the machine. I'm going to make an adjustment here. Came pretty close. And what we're going to do is sew a scant 1/4 inch on each seam. So I'm going to come in here, and what I like to do is of course, you probably already know this about me, I like to use a charger or a leader. They're called many different things. Now I'm using a regular stitch length here. If you want to use a little shorter one, that's okay. When you use a little shorter stitch, what's going to happen is that seam is going to be just a little sharper. Okay, so I know my machine and I know exactly where I need to be to get my scant 1/4 inch seam allowance here. And the reason again that we use the scant 1/4 inch is because when we turn that fabric to press it, there is a little dimension that's taken up there. So we want to make sure that we have it correct. So get my leaders off of here, and I'm going to turn this around, and now I am going to stitch my other side. Again, remember we're going from side to side instead of around the block as we will do when we do our log cabin block. Okay, so here we go. Now leave my charger in there. Charger actually accomplishes two things. One is that actually it saves thread because we would be cutting off a piece of thread like about this long every seam we put in if we did not use the charger. Okay, So I have my first two seams. I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to finger press those first. And what you're going to see is how beautiful that glue basting holds these two fabrics together so your seam allowance does not end up wonky. Nobody likes a wonky seam allowance. Okay, so our next pieces of fabric are right here. We're going to take those um, off of our design board. I like having the design board because then I know everything is laid out correctly. I'm going to take this to my iron. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to glue base these two seams and we'll be right back to stitch those. Okay, so again, what we've done here is we've gone ahead and put our right sides together, and I did glue base them, and I put both sides on at one time. It just makes sense to do it that way. Now, I do check, before I put this row on, or before I put these two on, I check to make sure that my measurements are correct with each set of strips I put on the block. Okay, that way if you have to do a little trimming or a little adjusting, you will definitely know about it. Okay, it's easier to do it while we're stitching than to try and do it in the end, and then you have one set of strips ending up to be much smaller than the others. This is just kind of a suspenders and belts sort of thing, but that's just the way I roll. And I have shown you in a previous tutorial how to set up your machine so that you know you're getting the perfect seam allowance. That is so, so ultimately important especially when you're piecing blocks like this, because in the end, the entire block is going to be determined correct if in fact you have checked those seam allowances and used those throughout the project. And I I'm sure I've never done this before. Uh, checked my seam allowances and then at the end my block is off. So check the blocks as you're doing them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and open this and I will finger press it. Okay, on both sides. Then I will take it to the iron. I will press it open. And what I will do then, I will measure this. Go ahead with my ruler and I'm going to measure both ways. I'm going to measure here to see that it is even, and so far it is. Now here might be a little bit off because I have not pressed it yet, but that's okay. And here, yeah, it is. It's just a hair off. No worries. Once it gets pressed, it's going to be a perfect square. So I will go take care of that, and then I'll meet you back here for the next set of strips. Okay, I am back, and this is going to be my third set of strips, and we're just going to keep going back and forth on each side until we have all of our strips sewn together. Now, I should probably tell you that the strips I've chosen to make are 2 inches. Actually, the center motif, and I should give you this instruction as well, is going to be 3.5 inches for that center square. And that's the only part of the quilt that's actually square to begin with. Okay, our strips, every time we put the second set of strips on, so we're going 1, 2, 1, 2. We're going to be able to square it up. Although I do measure it each time I put a set of strips on. It's easier to make it more accurate as you're working on it than to wait and try to square it up at the end. And remember, this is a journey that we're taking, and it's enjoyable, and don't try to rush through it. Just take your time and enjoy this journey. There we go. So I'm going to continue around. I have 3 more set of strips to put on, and after I get all 3 of them on, we'll meet you back here and just talk about the finished quilt block. Now, what I like to do at this point is I do like to take my 12.5-inch square ruler and lay it on top of here. The center is clearly marked, so you'll be able to see where you're at with it and if there's any trimming that's necessary. I hope this tutorial has been fun for you. I hope that you'll try this block. I don't think you'll be disappointed. And as I said before, if you don't have a design board, it's a great tool to have when making blocks like this. Let's see if I can get it under here. No, I can't. What this is it's just a piece of foam core. I've got some batting on it. Actually, it's fleece. And then I just literally sewed a binding around the edge of it. You don't have to. You can use duct tape if you want or something else. I was just really pleasantly surprised at how easily this went under my needle. It was on a bigger machine. I don't have the room to put it on this one. And it's just, you can have all of your pieces laid out on there. Again, I hope this has been helpful. This is our block 2 of our piecing series for 2024. Each block will end up measuring 12.5 inches. So when we're done, we're going to have 24 blocks in which to make a quilt out of. So until we see you next time on 906 Quilting, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. That's really important to me. And I love your comments. So keep them coming. And until we meet again, let's quilt.